My name is Madeline Pierce, and 3 weeks ago I received an invitation that began like any other until I reached the last line. It read, Cedar Valley Lodge. Madeline, don't attend. I stared at it for a long minute, then replied with 2 words that felt colder than silence. Understood. The message was short, clinical, and final, like a door quietly locking behind me. The morning of the party, I arrived anyway. I stood near the lobby window as my father shook hands with guests, unaware of the shift already in motion, when the resort director approached him and said, Sir, the owner would like to speak with you. He smiled politely, expecting a business formality. Then she pointed toward me. His expression cracked just enough for me to see the truth. He had no idea whose ground he was standing on. Security waited by the door for my signal. But I didn't move. I simply said, Let him come to me. My voice stayed even, the kind that travels farther than shouting ever could. I watched him cross the marble floor, confusion tightening his face, pride struggling to keep up. The string quartet played something graceful, almost mocking, as if the music itself knew what was about to unravel. That was the moment the balance shifted. But the story didn't start there. It began the moment I learned what being invisible in your own family truly means. I wasn't there to ruin a birthday. I was there to return what had been quietly taken. Before the night was over, my father would understand why some invitations carry warnings, and why silence, when chosen carefully, can be the loudest answer in the room. My family has always been a portrait of success framed in selective lighting. My father, Richard Pierce, retired from running a grocery chain and still introduces himself as a man who built something real. My sister Julia is a dermatologist in Boston, and my brother Grant a corporate attorney in Chicago. At every dinner, my parents recite their titles like credentials carved into marble. And when they reach my name, my father clears his throat and says, Madeline works online. Something flexible with computers. Before moving on as if I were a footnote, I learned early that silence keeps the peace. When my mother smiled at guests and said, She's creative. Our tech girl. I smiled too, though the word girl landed like a pin in glass. Julia once asked, Do you even have a boss? And Grant added, Or do you just make websites for people? I answered, Something like that. Because explaining that I built a logistics platform used by national retailers would only invite disbelief. And disbelief from family cuts deeper than from strangers. The distance between us was always disguised as politeness. My father believed real work required a briefcase and parking validation. When I tried to describe the contracts I managed, he said, It's good you have hobbies. My mother whispered later. He just worries you don't have stability. As if owning my company meant less than having a supervisor. Every time. I told myself their ignorance wasn't personal, it was inherited. Passed down with the same dinner china they cherished more than conversation. Still, their words lingered. At gatherings, I could predict the rhythm of introductions, the pride, the applause, the pause before me. This is Julia. Our daughter, the doctor. This is Grant. Our son, the attorney. And this is Madeline, she does online work. That 2-second silence became its own family tradition. The space where I disappeared. I stopped correcting them. Some truths are wasted on people who only listen for echoes of themselves. The email arrived on a Thursday afternoon with the subject line, Richard Pierce's 65th birthday celebration. It was a group message sent from my mother to the entire family, formal black tie. Cocktails at 6. Dinner at 7. Venue confirmed at Cedar Valley Lodge. I scrolled through the list and found my name at the bottom. Wedged between distant cousins, I typed a simple reply. Looking forward to it. It's Diderot. 3 days later, a new email appeared. this time from my father directly. Madeline, it began, after some consideration. Your mother and I feel this should be an adults-only event. Given the professional nature of our guests, we'd prefer to keep the atmosphere appropriate. We know you're busy with your online work, so perhaps we can celebrate your birthday separately next month. I read it twice, then a third time, as if repetition might make it less insulting. My response was brief. Understood. Enjoy the celebration. An hour later, he replied. Appreciate your understanding. This is important for my reputation. The words sat in my inbox like a bruise that wouldn't fade. I stared at them until the meaning hardened into clarity. My father's image mattered more than my presence. The polite phrasing only sharpened the truth. He wasn't protecting the event from disruption. He was protecting it from me. I forwarded the email chain to Veronica Blake, the lodge's director, adding one line. This is the event I mentioned. Let's discuss details. She called within minutes, her tone cautious but curious. Your father's assistant confirmed the reservation this morning, she said. Do you want me to proceed as planned? I answered. Exactly as planned. Full service. No changes. Veronica hesitated. And when the Pierces arrive, I said, treat them like royalty. But when the owner shows up, make sure everyone knows who signs the checks. To Eddie West. Veronica's voice came through the phone, steady but curious. Your father's assistant confirmed the booking this morning. Grand ballroom. Premium bar. Full grounds exclusive. Do you want to proceed as is? I told her. Exactly as is. Give them every upgrade they ask for. She hesitated before asking. And when they find out who owns the place? I said. They won't. Not until I decide they should. Her pause carried a hint of amusement. So this is personal, I answered. It's procedural. 3 years ago, when the lodge went on the market for $26 million, I bought it under Aurora Holdings. Part business, part curiosity, Veronica asked. Curiosity about what? I said. About how people behave when they think you have nothing to offer them. That was enough explanation for her. Professionals recognize the difference between drama and strategy. I kept my role invisible by design. The staff knew me only as the investor who approved budgets, the silent owner who never interfered. I told Veronica, if anyone from the Pierce party asks questions, treat them like your most valuable clients. She said. Understood. They requested the 7-course tasting and a top-shelf open bar. I replied, approve everything. Let them believe they deserve perfection. She laughed quietly. You're funding their night to remember, I said. Exactly. I want them comfortable before the floor shifts. There was a kind of calm in preparation. Every invoice, every catering detail, every reservation passed through my approval. I didn't alter a single thing. Only ensured the payments cleared without notice. Veronica mentioned, your father's assistant sounded impressed by our efficiency. I said, good. Make sure she feels proud of negotiating with herself. For a moment, the line went silent before Veronica spoke again. You're setting quite a trap. Madeline. I corrected her. Not a trap, just a mirror. When we ended the call, I sat at my desk and looked at the framed certificate on the wall, the original purchase deed of Cedar Valley Lodge. Beneath the printed numbers was my signature. Proof that ownership sometimes means patience. I didn't need to ruin my father's celebration. I only needed to attend it on my terms. The plan required no confrontation, no theatrics. Just presence, the one thing I'd been denied for years. I arrived at Cedar Valley Lodge just before sunset. The kind of light that makes everything look temporary. Veronica met me by the private entrance and said, your father's speech just ended. He thanked Julia for her clinic expansion and Grant for his new partnership. I asked, "Did he mention me?" She shook her head. "Not once." I smiled. "Perfect. That means I'm right on time." I'm C. From the hallway, I could hear laughter rolling through the ballroom. The practiced rhythm of people comfortable with hierarchy. Veronica said, "He seems proud tonight." I replied, "He should be. Pride looks best before it breaks." She hesitated. "Do you want me to announce you?" I said. "No. Let them see for themselves." My voice stayed calm. The same tone I used in boardrooms when closing deals with men who underestimated me. The difference was that this deal was personal. When I stepped into the ballroom, the sound shifted just enough to notice. Glasses clinked slower. Conversations thinned, and I felt every set of eyes decide whether to recognize me or not. My mother's smile flickered, unsure if I was supposed to be there. My father turned from a group near the bar. His laughter cutting off mid-word. He walked toward me, keeping his voice low. "Madeline, what are you doing here? You weren't invited." I answered, "I'm aware, but I have a standing invitation. Ownership has its privileges." "Z's." He frowned, confusion tightening his face. "This is my birthday, not a business event," I said. "I'm attending both." My mother's hand found his sleeve. "Please, don't make a scene." I met her eyes. "I'm not making one. I'm standing in one." For a second, the music filled the silence they left hanging between us. My father whispered, "You need to leave." I replied, "I think you'll want to hear what the director has to say before you decide that." His expression froze at the word director. I nodded toward the far door. "She's waiting for you." That was the moment the air shifted, the calm before recognition becomes consequence. My father's voice dropped to a whisper that barely covered his anger. "This is my event." "Madeline, you're embarrassing yourself." I looked at him and said, "Am I? Or are you embarrassed that I showed up at all?" My mother's fingers tightened around his arm as she hissed, "Please." "Not here," I said quietly. "Here is exactly right. It's time someone told the truth in this family." Before he could reply, Veronica appeared beside us with the calm authority of someone who knows every secret in the room. She said, "Mr. Pierce, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the property owner needs a quick word about tonight's arrangements." My father exhaled in irritation. "Can this wait? I'm in the middle of something." Veronica's tone stayed polite. "I'm afraid it can't." "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding about event authorization." He frowned. "Authorization? Everything was confirmed weeks ago." She gestured toward me. "Perhaps Mrs. Auctions. Pierce can clarify." "Doctig." For a moment, no one spoke. My father's confusion slipped into disbelief. "Clarify what?" Veronica lifted her tablet. "According to our records, Cedar Valley Lodge is owned by Aurora Holdings, LLC. Managed by one person, Madeline Pierce." His face went still. His voice caught halfway between denial and realization. "That's not possible." Veronica turned the screen toward him. "Property deed. Incorporation documents. Ownership filings. All current." My mother's hand flew to her mouth as I said, "Happy birthday, Dad. I wanted tonight to be special." 1. Julia had drifted over by then, her eyes wide. "You own this lodge?" she asked. I answered, 3 years now. You've all been excellent customers." Grant stepped forward, disbelief cutting through his usual confidence. "You don't have that kind of money." I said, "I did when I sold my first company for $9 million. My second one's valued at $200 million now. That tends to open a few doors." My father muttered, "You should have told us." I said. I tried. You heard what you wanted instead. Oh. The silence that followed carried more weight than any argument we'd ever had. Guests nearby pretended not to listen but leaned closer anyway. Veronica asked softly, "Should I inform everyone the issue's resolved?" I nodded. "Everything's approved. And please upgrade the bar top shelf. No charge. My father deserves the best." Then I looked back at him and said, "Consider it a gift from your invisible daughter." The applause from the other side of the room had faded, replaced by the sound of my family running out of words. Eleanor found me first, her voice trembling as she said, "Madeline, why would you humiliate your father like that?" I answered. "I didn't humiliate him." "Mom, the truth did," she whispered. "He's proud of you. He just didn't know." I looked out toward the dark trees and said, "He didn't care to know. There's a difference. Actually, remember." Richard appeared a moment later. His tone clipped but low enough to sound controlled. "You made a spectacle out of my birthday," he said. I replied, "No. I walked into a party at my own property. The spectacle happened when you told me I wasn't good enough to attend." He tried to recover. "You could have warned me," I said. "Would you have treated me differently? Or just found another reason to keep me out?" His silence was its own confession. Heavier than any apology. Eleanor tried again. Her words softer now. "He didn't mean what he said in that email." I turned to her and said, "Of course he did. He's believed it for years. Tonight he just had to say it out loud." Richard's jaw tightened. "You came here to embarrass me," I said. "No. I came here to remind you that erasing someone doesn't make them disappear." He exhaled through his teeth. Unable to look at me, "You've changed," he muttered. I said, "No. I've just stopped performing small for people who prefer it that way." Iv Valot. The wind carried the music from inside, soft and distant, like a celebration happening in another lifetime. Richard finally asked, "What do you want from us?" I answered. "Nothing. That's the point." For a brief second, he looked almost human again. Stripped of every title, I left them standing there, realizing that sometimes silence isn't revenge, it's closure. The silence after that night stretched for days before the messages began to arrive. Julia called first. Her tone clipped. "You humiliated Dad," she said. And I answered. "He did that himself," she said. "You didn't have to prove a point that way." I said. "I didn't prove a point. I revealed one." The line went quiet before she muttered. "I didn't realize you were doing that well," I said. "That's because none of you ever asked." Grant sent an email instead of calling. I looked up Aventra. He wrote, "Impressive numbers." I replied, "Thanks for finally checking." He didn't respond. My mother tried daily, leaving voicemails that started with, "Your father is hurting," and ended with, "We need to fix this." I never called back. Some apologies come only after reputations bruise, not hearts. Each message sounded like damage control disguised as concern. Julia's second call came late one night. "He's ashamed," she said. "He should be," I replied. Not for being wrong, but for never wanting to be right. When the phone went silent again, I realized the fallout wasn't chaos, it was clarity. The storm had passed, but they were the ones standing in its aftermath. 2 months later, my father showed up at my office unannounced. Looking smaller than I remembered, he said, "I've been thinking about what you said that night." I answered. "Which part?" He took a breath. "All of it. I was wrong to dismiss you. I didn't understand what you built." I said. "You didn't want to understand." He nodded. "That's fair. Can we start over?" I studied him. unsure whether I saw regret or strategy. Only if you stop measuring worth by job titles, I said. He looked down, then met my eyes. I can do that. I'm proud of you. Madeline, I replied. Be proud of the person, not the profit. His silence told me he heard it. When he finally left, the air in my office felt lighter, like the first space in years that belonged entirely to me. I arrived at Thanksgiving with a bottle of wine that cost more than any of their gifts combined. Not to impress, but to remind myself I could. My mother greeted me at the door, saying carefully, "Your father's been looking forward to this," I said. That's new. Inside, the table was set as if nothing had ever happened. Yet everything felt rewritten. My father cleared his throat and introduced me differently this time. This is Madeline, our daughter, founder of Aventra Systems and owner of Cedar Valley Lodge. I nodded slightly and said, That's a start. Dinner moved slowly at first. But then Grant leaned forward. How did you land that federal contract? I told him about the process, the proposal, the audits, the negotiations. He listened without interrupting. Which was a first, Julia added. Our hospital board's been talking about resource management software. Maybe we should talk, I said. Have them reach out. I'll make time. My mother smiled as if she was seeing me for the first time in years. When dessert came, my father lifted his glass. To Madeline, he said. His voice quieter now. For building something real and for teaching us what that truly means. I looked around the table and said, To second chances but the earned kind. For once, the toast didn't feel rehearsed. It felt deserved. When dinner ended, I stepped outside, the cold air cutting through the warmth that still lingered from inside. My father followed me to the doorway and said quietly, Thank you for coming. I turned to him and answered, You don't need to thank me. Just keep doing better. He nodded once. The way people do when they finally understand something they can't undo. I stood on the porch watching the light spill from the dining room windows, voices blending into something softer than before. For years, I thought revenge was about being seen, about forcing acknowledgement from people who refused to look. But standing there, I realized it wasn't about that at all. I didn't need their recognition to validate the work, the success, or the person I had become. The only thing I'd ever needed was distance clear enough to see them as they were. I whispered to myself. They finally saw me because I stopped needing them to best. The night felt quiet. Not empty, but complete. Some stories don't end with triumph, they end with peace. And for the first time in a decade, peace finally looked like mine. Thank you for watching Madeline Pierce's story. If you've ever been underestimated, remember that silence can be power when it's backed by truth. You don't have to prove your worth to those who refuse to see it. Subscribe for more stories of justice, resilience, and the quiet strength that changes everything.